good to see you. And I would say the floor is yours, and we'll be back. And I say, go ahead.
Thank you, Martijn. Good afternoon, everybody. Let me share my screen. I assume there has been quite some talking and listening already today, so I will try to make it a little bit interactive, and to do so I would like to use Menti. So if you just take your mobile phone, if you go to menti.com, and if you enter the code you see here on top, 4287937, then you should be able to log on to a couple of questions. Certainly given the fact that some people are online, some people are remote or at home. If you go to menti.com and you give in the code, I will also do that in the meantime over here, you should be able to log on using the code, and let me see where you are. 937. You should be able to see the first question, so let me know. I've seen that there is a broad audience, really people coming from different backgrounds. So are you more in the consulting area? Are you working for a production company, manufacturing company, distribution company? Are you in academia, or are you a student? Or are you something else? Maybe you are a journalist. There's probably some people from supply chain media in the room as well. So let me know. So you all got the trick. Let me switch to the next question. So if you go to the next question, so for the people who are in manufacturing or distribution, the practitioners, how would you rate your S&OP maturity on a 1 to 5 scale? If you are a consultant, how would you rate your client's S&OP maturity on a 1 to 5 scale? And for academics or students, I would say, how would you rate your student knowledge? And for the stage 1 to 5, I used here the Gartner maturity stages. So also if you go into the app, you will see that 1 is the react stage, 2 is anticipate, and so on. So I'll give you a couple of minutes to react. See that 9 people have reacted. Expect many more, yes. So menti.com, use the code. Yeah, so you can also see a little bit the distribution if you look at the slide. I think if I would talk to Gartner, they would say clients are rated 1 to 2, 2 to 3. It strikes me here that the consultants have a slightly more pessimistic view. And when it comes about student knowledge, yeah, apparently we still have a lot of education to do in the S&OP domain. I'm also part of my time linked to a business school in Belgium called Vlerick, and I agree that S&OP is there is a lot of education to be done there. I often say that S&OP maturity is probably also the most overrated metric, meaning that if companies rate themselves, how it often goes with Gartner, we probably make ourselves look a little bit better than it is in reality. So that might also explain the difference here between the practitioners and the consultants scoring, where the consultants are a bit more conservative and say, well, no, we're not at 2. We're probably rather somewhere between 1 and 2. And if you know that that scale goes up to all the way up to 5, it means that a lot of companies still have a long way to go. Let's go to the next question. So if we take 2-3 minutes, what would you consider as the biggest hurdles to a successful S&OP implementation? So again, you can go to Menti, and yeah, what do you consider to be the biggest hurdle? So feel free to post a couple of topics here, a couple of sentences or a couple of words. Is it due to a lack of knowledge? Is it due to a lack of tooling? Are we too functionally organized? What do you consider as the biggest hurdles to a successful S&OP implementation? Ownership, change management. Yeah, who owns the S&OP process? Good question. Change, technology, data. I'll come back to data as well. Knowledge. I agree that on the one hand, it seems that everybody knows S&OP, but at the same time, when I'm in companies, maybe S&OP is known within the supply chain community, but not necessarily much broader. Use of tool and data. So many companies go through Excel hell, also when we are now in the budgeting process. I think in general, it seems like complexity has outgrown us. We lack good quality data, and we lack good tooling to be able to master it. Money, yeah. If you want to do it properly, it's not cheap, but at the same time, I believe there's a huge business case for doing S&OP. Forecasting, too much short-term focus. We'll also try to get back to that one. So, okay. Let me switch to my presentation. Sorry, it was a bit clumsy from my side. So, let me start with the following question. S&OP, okay, but why do we do S&OP? I had people and who came to me and they said, well, I want to do S&OP, but it's difficult to convince my management, or it's difficult to convince the sales manager. And then I start asking and I say, okay, what's your service level? Do you have service issues? No, the service is perfect. What about the cost? Do you need to reduce the cost? No, cost is not an issue. Do you need to reduce inventories? No, inventories are not an issue. Yeah, but if there's no issue, then maybe you don't need to do S&OP. And it's a bit awkward, but it's something I really encounter when I talk to companies and when I talk to supply chain professionals. Sometimes it seems that we just want to do S&OP for the purpose of doing S&OP, but that's not how it works. S&OP is not a goal in itself. S&OP is only a means to an end. Yeah? It's a tool that can be used to solve something. So before you start with S&OP, try to make clear on what do you want to solve. And the concept we typically use for that is that supply chain triangle. I've recognized some names in the people who subscribed here. So some people might know the concept. It's also described here in detail in my book, Supply Chain Strategy and Financial Metrics. And the triangle captures the tension or the debate I see in many companies, where if you are the VP of marketing and sales in your company and you wake up in the morning, what's your first thought? If you are in marketing or sales, it's probably top line, market share, and as a result, salespeople are often putting the top side of that triangle, the service side. If you are the VP of production and you step into the car in the morning, what's your first thought? It's most probably efficiency. Why? Because efficiency is driving cost. It could be efficiency and safety, probably for a VP operations. In general, I see that operations people are primarily cost oriented. So they primarily pull the cost side of the triangle. And in some companies, that's like the eternal debate. It's like the eternal debate between sales and operations, and they both are pulling like each one corner of the triangle. It's like putting two sides of a rope. And in that case, if that's the discussion, I often see inventories or cash making huge swings as a result. I see companies that finish the year, the 31st of December, with 100 million of inventory, and end of March, 3 months later, that is 135. So 3 months later, we have added 35 million, let's say 35%, to the inventory. That's 35 million that needs to be financed. It needs to come from somewhere. So that game continues until finance kicks in. And then finance says, yeah, but we need to play this game with less inventory and with a constantly lower inventory. And it's by introducing cash, yeah, that you close that triangle and that you create tension in that triangle. And I often say, well, finance doesn't understand anything of inventory. And why is that? Because inventory is a very operational thing. It's a buffer against uncertainty on demand. It has to do with lot sizing in production. So I need to balance it with changeover costs. I need to take a look at seasonality and stock builds up for seasons or SAP go lives or major plant shutdown. So inventory is a complex animal, and because finance doesn't understand inventory, they will look for a victim, which is the VP supply chain. So typically it's up to the VP supply chain to lower the inventory, but that's not an easy task, because managing the inventory is really about managing the balance here in that triangle. So before I continue, let me again go here to that next question. Like, do you recognize that struggle in the triangle? You just use dementi.com, and if all goes well, you are going to the next question. Yeah, I see basically 4s and 5s. Yeah, so quite a broad group across different locations. But in general, we do recognize that struggle. So is it important? Let me continue over here. Is it important? Does it matter, the balance in the triangle? It does. And why does it? Well, the answer there is taking a financial perspective. Service in the end is a driver for the top line. If you improve your service and you're not impacting the top line, maybe you are in a very difficult market or something is broken, but in general, if you improve service, and service take a broad perspective, it's much more than just the on-time and full delivery performance. It's also how narrow or broad is the product portfolio, or maybe you are doing consignment stocks or VMI. That's also a type of service you deliver to customers. So improving services basically should improve the top line. But as an investor, I'm not just interested in the top line or growth. I also want to see a margin. Well, if I combine the top line with the cost, I get to the margin. And the tricky thing is that as an investor, I'm not just interested in margin. And the reason is, if I have two companies that generate 100 million of EBIT, earnings before interest and taxes, the first company uses 100 million of capital and the second company uses only 50 million of capital, then of course I'd rather do the second investment twice. So as an investor, I'm concerned with what's the margin you generate over the capital employed, which is, in financial terms, the return on capital employed. And the capital employed, the financial definition is, on the one hand, it's the working capital. And out of the working capital, inventory is certainly the most complex one to manage. And it's the fixed assets. And the fixed assets is what you invest in, the net property, plant, and equipment. So your physical assets, and it consists of goodwill. So as an investor, I say if I have invested capital here, that capital employed, the working capital and the fixed assets, I want to see a return on that. Financially, the return on capital employed, the Americans call it the bang for the buck. I give you $1, I give you $1. What do you give me as a return? What's the bang you give me as a return? So balancing the triangle, while many companies struggle, it's essential or crucial to to create balance in the triangle, because balancing the triangle is about optimizing the value for the shareholder as measured by that return on capital employed. It also shows that supply chain and finance have the same objective. It's shown over here, generating value for the shareholder through return on capital employed. And so why do we do S&OP? Well, I do S&OP to improve value as measured by that return on capital employed. And before jumping to S&OP within your company, what we often do is use that triangle to understand what are the issues. So if you just draw a triangle, and I invite you to do it tomorrow, virtually or when you are in the office, you draw a triangle service cost and cash, or more broadly service cost and capital employed, and you hand out post-its and you say to people, okay, but where do we struggle with balance in the triangle? That's always our first step. This is a second example. You just draw a triangle and you ask to people, yeah, but where do we struggle with balance in the triangle? So before you start with S&OP, make sure that everybody understands what is the problem. It's also shown over here. A common understanding of the problem will lead to a common ambition to do something about it. And if you have a common ambition to do something about it, then you can start talking about S&OP as a potential way to solve that problem. Before we jump into S&OP, I also want to link it to strategy. And what's your strategy, or what is strategy in general? A model I often use is the model of Tracy and Wiersema, who say, okay, we've studied market leaders. That's the name of the book here, The Discipline of Market Leaders. And market leaders are companies which outperform their competitors over a longer period of time. So not just 2 or 3 years, but really 5, 10, 15, 20 years. They consistently and over a longer term outperform their competitors. And Tracy and Wiersema discovered that market leaders make a choice, and they propose 3 strategic options: operational excellence, product leadership, and customer intimacy. And once they've made a choice, they are extremely disciplined in executing that choice. Giving examples is always dangerous, but I will still do so. Operational excellence. Operational excellence is lowest cost, and lowest cost to be able to give the lowest price in the market. For me, a typical example there is Ryanair. Normally I ask who has already flown with Ryanair. Well, nobody flies today, but in general, many people have flown with Ryanair. And why did you fly with Ryanair or choose Ryanair? Because of the lowest cost. And the whole operating model of Ryanair is focused on generating that lower cost. So they started flying on regional airports where landing fees are lower, where they were also heavily subsidized. They have only one type of aircraft, which reduces maintenance costs. An airplane only brings money when it's in the air, so they try to really minimize the turnaround time. I often say jokingly, if they could, they would have people coming off via one door and have the others going in via the back door all at the same time. So minimizing the turnaround cost is also something they really focus on. And it's not that they don't deliver service, but they really trim the service to the basics. And one of the basic services they want to give is on-time departure and on-time arrival. Me as a business traveler, it's important, right? I want to leave on time, I want to arrive on time, because that allows me to plan my schedule. And it's also good for their operational excellence, because if I can plan that very accurately, I can also minimize the turnaround time. But there will be no free drinks or no decent meals, so that's what the things they have cut. Product leadership is best product. I often refer there to Apple. And Apple is a dangerous example, because at the same time, I think Apple has been challenged by Samsung and other companies. So do they still have the best product? But if I look back when I started my career in '98 in IT, Apple was near death. That was the time that Steve Jobs came back into the company, and if they were virtually bankrupt, and see what type of turnaround that company made. And that also summarizes the challenge for a product leader. The challenge for a product leader is not launching a successful new product. No, the challenge for a product leader is creating a continuous stream of innovative products. And these are the companies that also easily get hyped. So each product you launch could be your last product. If I'm Apple and I launch a new product which is called iWatch, if the iWatch is a flop, then I can lose 30% of my market capitalization. That's typical for those product leaders. And then customer intimacy. The negative way of stating it is saying, okay, I'm not necessarily the cheapest, I'm not necessarily the first one with a new product on the market, but I have the best total solution, yeah, for a well-chosen segment of customers. And IBM has a lot of patents. IBM is famous for innovation. But IBM was not always the first on the market with a new technology. If you take a desktop operating system, they outsourced it to a company called Microsoft. It was Windows. So I associate IBM with, okay, if I'm the CIO of a mid-sized to large multinational, then IBM will help me to solve my IT problems, right? So they will solve me to get a grip on my total IT question. And that sounds appealing, but it's not that easy, because I think for operational excellence, operations is dominant. For product leadership, innovation and marketing is dominant. And here for customer intimacy, I need to have a very well-educated sales force, and it's that sales force that needs to be designing that total solution, and they also need to be able to then realize that total solution. So it's not easy, but if I do it well, it also leads to a lasting advantage. That's what Tracy and Wiersema are telling us. And okay, these models are sector independent. So if you would look at retail, okay, in retail, what is operational excellence? Lowest cost. Here are the hard discounters. What would be product leadership? Product leadership are typically those more upscale retail brands, like you would have the fresh market, Whole Foods market, which has been bought by Amazon, like locally grown, anti-allergen, healthy foods. That would be the focus, and that's premium, that's upscale. And what would in retail, food retail, be customer intimacy? For me, it's the traditional supermarket. So it could be a Kroger in the US, or it could be Albert Heijn in the Netherlands, or Deleuze or Carrefour in Belgium. So the traditional supermarket has a combination of A, B, and C brands, and basically you can do all your groceries for the full week with me. If you go to a hard discounter, you can't do all your groceries for the full week. You might need to do multiple shops. And yeah, my feeling is that in general, companies have difficulties in making a choice. Strategy literature in general says strategy is about making choices, but in practice, I have the feeling that companies are bad at strategy. We think that choosing is losing. So I often see the ambition that, yeah, but we want to be the first one on the market with a new product, and it needs to be at the lowest price, and we need to have the broadest product portfolio, and come up with a total solution. So strategy says you need to make a choice, but my feeling is that in practice companies are bad at making choices. So let me see what you think about it. So I will try to launch here another question. So have you made clear strategic choices? What does it trigger with you? wait for a couple of seconds. See, only 2 people are reacting. So, is your strategy clear? Have you made clear strategic choices? Yeah, we seem to be stuck somewhere in the middle, right? And okay, there's a couple of 3s and 4s, but we seem to be. It's not that we strongly disagree, but we do not strongly agree, right? So if you would need to drop something here, what would you say? Are you a cost leader? Are you a product leader? Or are you a best total solution leader? What are you? Cost leader, product leader, best total solution? Or are you a mix? Let's throw some things in the Menti here. What does it trigger with you? We are all 3. That's what strategy literature says you should not be doing, unless maybe when it's in different business units. Best total solution. There's a lot of best total solutions. That's striking. One product. I don't see a lot of cost leaders here. Not sure whether that has to do with the group here, but we will try to consolidate results afterwards, but it seems that more people are in the best total solution. There's a couple of products. Customer intimacy for A and B and operational excellence for C. That's interesting. Let's get back to that, all 3. So let me switch back to the presentation. Also here we can help. I really believe after discussing with many management teams, you need to make a choice. Tricia and Wirsema say, if you have product leadership, if you have customer intimacy, if you have operational excellence, you want to be on one of the extremes, right? You want to make an explicit choice. And what you see here is an example. Basically, we have an exercise which helps you to reveal your strategy, and different people might have different opinions. And this is from a company where there are 2 business units. And so the top here IWS, the bottom here MSW. And so strategies for different businesses could potentially be different. I think this maybe was from the supply chain team. The middle here was from the international management team. The right here was from a regional management team. So it's interesting to see, okay, are we clear on what is our strategy? Are we on one of the extremes? How consistent are we within a given team, for instance, within the supply chain team? And how consistent are we across teams? What we don't want to have is that sales thinks we are customer intimacy, operations thinks we are operational excellence, and R&D thinks we are product leadership. No, that's not going to work. That's not how strategy works. So revealing the strategy always leads to a better debate. And this is a second example. This is from a retailer. And this is a retailer which has different retail brands. And those different retail brands really have a different positioning and have a different strategy. But the key challenge for this retailer is like, if you have something which is fully axed on operational excellence, and you have something which is really more axed towards product leadership, and then you have a proposition which is more, let's say, based on customer intimacy, these, Tricia and Wirsema would say, these are really different operating models. So don't try to run this with the same team and with the same supply chain and with the same systems. It's most probably not going to work. So before we jump into solutions and systems and supply chains, also here, thinking through what is the impact of strategy, that is quite important. Strategy does have an impact on the supply chain, and that's what I want to show here. And here we again have our supply chain triangle. We have cost, we have service, we have capital employed or cash, and more outwards, it's now 3 axes. So this is the lower cost, higher service, and less capital employed, or for instance, less inventory. And we could say, okay, let's compare. If we take retail examples, let's take a lowest price player, which is a hard discounter like Aldi or Lidl, and let's take a differentiation player. And differentiation would be, for instance, a traditional a retailer like Albert Heijn or Deleuze, right? The supermarket, traditional supermarket. Who would have the lowest cost, Aldi or Albert Heijn? Well, for sure, Aldi will have the lowest cost. That's the primary goal of existence. It's having the lowest cost to be able to deliver the lowest price. If you look at inventory, who will have the lowest inventory? Aldi or Albert Heijn? Well, for sure, Aldi will have the lowest inventory. And why is that? Because Aldi has a smaller assortment. An Aldi store maybe has 2,000 or 2,500 SKUs. An Albert Heijn store might have 10,000 or 15,000 SKUs. Hard discounters don't like a long tail. Why? Because long tail kills efficiency. And remember that as a hard discounter, I'm focused on the lowest cost. So I don't want to have a long tail. I will just cut the long tail. I will cut off the long tail. I focus on the fast moving core of the assortment. And that has implications because, okay, who has the smallest stores? Well, clearly Aldi will have a smaller store. If I'm Albert Heijn and I need to display 15,000 SKUs, I will also need space to store the 15,000 SKUs. And I also know that that long tail of the 15,000 will be slow moving. So who will have the highest turnover or the highest sales per square meter? Well, certainly it will be Aldi. So Aldi will make more efficient use of the store space. And that's about the store space, but it's also about the distribution center. Who will have the smallest distribution center? It will be Aldi. If I have only 2,500 SKUs, I need only 2,500 picking places. Yeah? And because everything is fast moving, Aldi can basically just do cross-docking. So I'm even not storing inventory in my central warehouse. So that's drastically reducing the central warehouse space. And of course, I will have a lower service. Yeah? So the service I'm able to deliver is more basic compared to the service being delivered by an Albert Heijn. But that's how strategy works and also how strategy affects the supply chain. And if we link it back to that return on capital employed, we can say, okay, in general, a hard discounter will have a lower margin. And why has a hard discounter a lower margin? Well, because I want to have the lowest price. So the lowest price is my primary source of competition. So if I do an improvement somewhere, basically I will use that improvement to further lower the price. I go lower and lower and lower and lower. And it's okay that my margin is a bit lower because I can compensate with less capital employed. As an investor, I say that's okay. Your margin is a bit lower, but you compensate with less capital employed. As an investor, I say towards Albert Heijn, dear Albert Heijn, it's okay that you have a bit more capital as long as you compensate with a higher margin. If in Belgium I go to Deleuze, I know Deleuze is not the cheapest store, yeah, but I'm willing to pay a premium as a consumer because I have choice, right? I have different types of brands. I basically have something for every occasion, and I will be willing to pay a higher premium, a higher EBIT, yeah, for that extra complexity. That's how strategy plays here in the financial space and also in the supply chain space. And still I see the following. I see CFOs or CEOs and they say, I have a good idea. Actually, I have a brilliant idea. And then they say, what if we would do the following? What if you do the following? What if you would bring me the service, or for instance, a gross margin of Albert Heijn, but you bring me that service or gross margin with the cost and with the inventory or the invested capital of Aldi. And then you need to say, well, time out. This is not going to work. That's not possible. You can dream that up, but that's not going to work. So in practice, I see conflicting targets or maybe conflicting objectives on the different corners of the triangle. And yeah, let me also again pause here for a question and see if you also struggle in your company. So do you struggle with setting appropriate inventory targets? Let me know. Changing a little bit as more people jump in. You can see the distribution here. So somebody who strongly disagrees would be interesting to talk to that person later. In general, many people indeed seem to struggle with that. So here again, I believe we can help. What we developed, it's also in the book I mentioned in the beginning, is what we call strategic benchmarking. And it's based on two-dimensional benchmarking. So we don't just look at inventory turns. We here look at the combination of inventory turns and operating income, which is EBIT. And of course, everybody would like to be on the top right. Maybe we want to have inventory turns of 10 with an operating income of 20%. That's the example I just tried to give, but that's not going to happen. Nobody in this industry has inventory turns of 10 with an EBIT of 20%. That's not happening. And this is an example benchmark we did for Hero. And okay, well, first of all, if we look at Hero, you see that Hero is lagging behind. The inventory turns are lower and the EBIT is lower compared to, for instance, Hershey or Mondelez. And first of all, we could say, okay, but what is our own best performance? If we look at our own best performance in inventory turns, it was probably here around 5.5. But okay, those years where we had the best inventory performance, that was not necessarily the best EBIT performance. So you automatically feel the balance between the two. And we can draw lines, which we call bang for the buck lines. So that means, okay, this line here are all the combinations of inventory and EBIT, where as an investor, we are indifferent. We say it's okay that your turns are lower. It's okay that you need more inventory as long as you compensate with a higher operating income, or vice versa. Yeah, if your EBIT is a bit lower, that's fine, as long as you compensate with less inventory. So that's the indifference line. And using this type of techniques, you can refine your target setting and not just set targets for inventories, but also set targets for inventories, cash conversion cycle, payables, receivables, fixed asset turns, and EBIT all at the same time. And strategy has an impact. Product leaders will always have more complexity, but they can compensate with a higher EBIT. So product leaders will be more up on the curve. And if you are more a commodity player, your margins will be lower and you should be able to simplify things. So you should have less inventory. So operational excellence players will be over there. So you can tie in the strategy. And that technique can be used for inventory, but as you see here, cash conversion cycle, net property, plant and equipment. How efficient am I in the use of my assets? Fixed asset, which then also includes the goodwill. And as I said in the beginning, we use return on capital employed. So you see here different levels of return on capital employed of different in this case, food players, food in the FMCG. And okay, if I'm Hero and my current ROCE is around 10%, then maybe Hershey might be a step too far because they are at 34%. But at least as Hero, I might want to get to the performance of Nestlé. And then the question is, what does that mean? And not just for inventories, but for different financial metrics. And here again, I think better benchmarks lead to more realistic target setting. And that is important if you want to drive realistic and sustainable improvements. Now let me get to S&OP. We have described our vision on S&OP in detail. So I could basically talk an extra hour on S&OP and on our vision on S&OP. So I will refer you here to our website. We include segmentation. I see a lot of companies use the same service level for all customers and for all products, and that simply cannot be true. No two customers are equal. They don't have the same volume, they don't have the same margin, they don't have the same loyalty, they don't have the same willingness to innovate, and also no two products are equal. Some products more reflect the past, others more reflect the future. Some products are easy for you to make, some products are a pain in the neck. So you need to segment, that's crucial. Just to give one example, once you know who are the A customers, well, in your demand planning process, stop guessing what these customers will buy from you. If it's A customers, start a collaborative process with the customers. Go out and ask them. In supply planning, make sure that you can prioritize, and that you can prioritize A customers and A products when there is a shortage, or when there is a potential shortage. If you want to do that, you need good tooling. Many companies still try to do it with Excel, and that's where you hit the limits. So if you want to do S&OP at a given level of maturity, you're not going to manage that with Excel. We'll come back to the tooling aspect. We include product management, so NPIs, new product introductions. There I often say 7 out of 10 NPIs are overstated. That's logical. I have never met a product manager who says, I'm going to launch a new product, it's going to be an absolute failure. No. If product managers are not a bit optimistic, they're in the wrong job, right? So if we know the uncertainty we need to embrace it. It also means that if 7 out of 10 are overstated, 3 out of 10 are understated, and I don't want to be out of product for a new product. So manage the uncertainty by addressing it as a separate step. Don't try to kind of include it in the demand planning process. It's different. And that's one side of the coin. The other side is end of life. So many companies are good at introducing new products, but very bad at taking old stuff out. Why? Because if I want to stop a product, then sales will say, yeah, but you cannot stop it because we sell it to that customer. And if we are no longer offering this product, then that customer will no longer buy from us. We've seen there is a lot of companies who say we are a total solution provider. If you are a total solution provider, then stopping SKUs is a nightmare. Well, also here we have a vision on how to have that discussion. We use that triangle and ROCE as a principle. It's not just about the top line, it's about what's the margin you generate over the invested capital, over the inventory. And if you look at what is the margin and what is the invested inventory, you can do that on an SKU level, you can do that on a customer level, you can do that on a product group level. You always have a long tail. So reveal that true profitability to manage your complexity. So these are just 2 steps I wanted to highlight. And if you want to know more, feel free to download our vision paper and reach out to us to know more. And I've been saying that for 10 years, but it's more than ever true that it's also what was the struggle in the beginning, we saw change management was there, lack of knowledge. So there is an important people aspect in S&OP. It's about processes because we are a partner of Arkiva, which is a tooling solution, and we've implemented tooling and then just finding out afterwards that we implemented the tooling, but there wasn't a process. Yeah, but if there is no process, yeah, the tooling will not be used or will not drive value. So process is key. You need decent tooling. Complexity of today's businesses is as such that you need to have decent tooling. And you can spice this up and power this up with analytics. You can use statistical forecasting, you can use statistical models to calculate inventory parameters, you can use optimization techniques for supply planning, you can use AI to do some self-learning on some of these steps over here. And yeah, let me jump to an extra question here. Yeah, where are you in your journey? So if you would need to rate yourself on S&OP maturity, how would you rate your people maturity? How would you rate your process maturity? How would you rate your tooling maturity? Just curious to see how that works with all of you. It's 4 questions, so maybe taking a bit more time. It's a bit different than I had expected. I'm not too surprised that process is a bit more advanced. I think everybody agrees that the process should come first. I am surprised that tooling is so closely following, because there, for me, it really feels that a lot of companies are stuck in the process because they are stuck on the tooling side. The tooling is really an enabler for the process improvement. And if I look at people and understanding of S&OP, it's just a feeling or an observation from my side. My feeling is that within the supply chain community, there is a good understanding of what S&OP is. But if we go to the sales community or to the finance community or into the more operations community, S&OP really feels like the supply chain thing, and people don't necessarily understand it, and they also don't necessarily embrace it as something which is good for the broader company. But would be interesting maybe to get your thoughts later on that. And how do you blend in the different aspects? So here again, there's too much to probably tell in this 1 hour presentation, but feel free to take a look here again at our resources page. We've described 7 steps where we try to better blend in, like, okay, I will need to work on awareness, I will need to work on the buy-in of people. At some point in time, I need to define my ambition, like, okay, where am I today and where do I want to get? If I would take the Gartner maturity model, if today I'm at level 1, what's my ambition? It's probably not realistic to immediately step to level 4, but okay, what is a realistic path? How does it affect my processes, and which type of tooling will I need to invest? What can I do with my ERP, or do I need to invest in an APS? Those are questions that need to be answered. Then think about building the capabilities, building the organization, and designing the processes, designing the tooling. So basically this is a summary of our 15 years in the field that we try to summarize. So for anybody who is in an S&OP journey, try to take a look at it and try to keep us posted. And when it comes to systems, well, We are the implementation partner of Arqiva in Europe. Arqiva is one of the software vendors in the leader quadrant of the Gartner S&OP Magic quadrant. So, which means like it's basically a very good tool. And so it's an advanced planning system, typically sits on top of the ERP. And just two things I wanted to add is that where also we as Solventure have heavily invested over the last years is data integration, because 10 years ago, many companies still had the ambition to go to one ERP system. And on the one hand, it feels for me like many companies have given up that dream. So many companies we come in have multiple ERP systems, and either it's different versions from SAP, or it could potentially be just different ERP systems. A lot of companies I talk to today have a huge challenge in migrating from SAP ECC to SAP HANA. And they really struggle with the question like, okay, do I need an APS on top of my ERP? And I'm not well placed to answer that question, but there's enough research out there which says, okay, the more tactical you get, the less user-friendly ERP systems are. So if you really want to do S&OP, which is in the tactical space, you need to have an APS. And if you have an APS and you are moving on the ERP landscape, then data integration is really key. And getting that data out, and harmonizing data across different instances, and then doing decent planning and getting data back in, that's key. And the second element we've been working on as Solventure is outside in thinking, or demand drivers in the demand planning. So everybody's hit by COVID. So if you look at the traditional statistical forecasting, which is just an extrapolation method, yeah, you know that's going nowhere. So the only way to do demand planning today is to look at, okay, what are good indicators for me to monitor? What are typically indicators that in the past have indicated a recovery? So where can I get early warning signals on whether this is going the good direction, or whether this will go back downhill, and whether this will be going in a bad direction? So next to the general APS, those are two special topics I wanted to highlight. And if you want to know more here, again, don't hesitate. Feel free to reach out to us. And I won't go in detail here. It will be in the handout. So that's just the illustration of the data integration. Do you need an APS? If you ask me, the answer is yes. But if you buy an APS, think about how you will integrate with the ERP. And this is an example of data sources across different industries. And you can start with monitoring data. That's what a lot of companies are doing today. Yeah. Once you start understanding the data, you can start building forecast models with it, but driver-based forecasts and not just extrapolation of the past, because if you extrapolate the past, you will be going nowhere. And this is an example of different monitoring baskets. So last topic for this presentation is here, where are we going? And everybody needs to do sales and operations execution, or S&OE. And the trick is to prevent problems and go to S&OP. But I firmly believe that we should go further, and we should integrate operational planning with financial planning. Well, that has been the promise of IBP, but IBP in many companies means that, okay, we have monetized the plan, but when it comes to budgeting, finance still has their own Excel tool. And in a new book that will be released in March, we really believe that to really bring balance in the triangle, we also need to integrate that strategic planning and work also top down. So work with, okay, what is our return on capital employed today? If we are at 5%, we want to go to 15% or to 20%. And how will we do that? Will we take the Aldi route, or will we take the Albert Heijn route, what is the impact of our strategy? So better connecting those different planning layers, that's certainly something we are working on. And I think my time is more or less up. I think that Martijn is also, I hear some noise back in the call. If you want to know more, please contact me. Normally, I would be at a booth and we can have some informal talks. We also have a breakout session after this, but I'm really curious on where you are, and I would certainly like to exchange further ideas.
Okay. Thank you.
Martijn?
Yeah, Bram, can you hear me?
Yes.
You're right. Interesting story. And if you want to know more, recently I did a webinar with Bram about S&OP more extensively. We have only a few minutes for questions. One interesting question is, how do you see S&OP in a wholesale environment? So typically it's from a manufacturing background, and but how do you see it in a wholesale environment?
Good question. If you consider as a wholesaler key suppliers as an extension of your supply chain, then basically it's the same. You might have more focus on product portfolio management and category management. On the demand side, you might have more focus on short-term demand sensing and including point of sale info and external data like Nielsen. But I would expect the key challenges are the same, and that working from those basic concepts easily points in the same direction.
And I also think that in a retail environment, it's quite similar. You know, it's coming from the manufacturing environment, but also seeing wholesalers and also retailers embracing S&OP. There's a question over there? No, okay. Bram, yeah, and there's not a question, but I don't know if, well, maybe briefly. Can you have a two-path strategy, for example, customer intimacy for A and B customers and operational excellence for C customers? Is that viable?
Tracy and Wiersema would say no. I know nobody wants to hear this, but still I will say Tracy and Wiersema say no, and I will basically also just say no. It's like combining, I often say it's like combining Etihad and Ryanair. It's not going to work. If you take somebody from Ryanair and you put that person with Etihad, the person dies on the spot. If you take somebody from Etihad and you put that person on Ryanair, that person dies on the spot. As supply chain, we are simply too gentle. We should force the business to make tougher decisions, and the solution for a lack of choices is not a segmented supply chain, and this would deserve a webinar in itself or a discussion in itself. But let's not simply say yes. I don't necessarily believe in segmented supply chains.
No. And I have a good example. You know, A.S. Watson is typically operational excellence, but within the same company they have Easy Paris Excel, and that's customer intimacy. So they have two brands for two different strategies. So I think that's the way how you should do it.
Yeah, but then think this through, and you might need not only different brands, but really different supply chains and different teams to manage those supply chains. It makes me think of, I see companies that combine private label and branded, but branded is focused on innovation, yeah, and private label is focused on cost. So either you have split personalities, which are extremely good at switching from one to the other, and we so easily say yes, and as supply chain people, we also fix the problem, but sometimes we need to hold the business accountable and say, yeah, but this requires some discussion and some debate. And at least what I want to say here is, I think this requires some discussion and some debate before we just say yes.